start. Recording has started and timer has started.
All right, and welcome to episode 2 of Mythical Monster Investigations. And today we are looking at the vampire, which is arguably the most famous monster in the world at this point. I
For the
mean,
wrong reasons, I'm sure.
oh, definitely all the wrong reasons. Uh, what's interesting about the vampire is that, well, the vampire is different from a lot of other monsters in that it has a very large portion of people who want to be a vampire. Like, there is an entire subculture of vampire enthusiasts. What do you guys think about that?
I blame the Twilight movies.
Actually, yeah, I do too. I second
story.
that.
And a story right there.
End of story. I
There
second
you
that
are,
entire thing.
There's your answer.
Okay, I was gonna try my best not to ever bring up those movies, so thank you for ruining that.
Okay, to actually give reason. Back when vampires used to be awesome. So, back during the time of Blade, back during the time of the old Christopher Lee and Nosferatu, where they had powers and they were scary and devastating. And I mean, I believe it was Deadliest Warrior, the TV series, did a Halloween episode of vampire versus a horde of zombies. Who will win? And the vampires won because they're knocking people's heads off and they're ripping.
Oh yeah, it was like 3 vampires to like 1,000 zombies.
Yeah.
But anyway, yeah, continue.
No, that was it. I mean, who wouldn't want to be a vampire? I mean, let's look at the downside from just those movies I named off. Garlic, sunlight, and being stabbed through the heart. Well, let's face it, being stabbed through the heart will kill most things. So let's just look at the garlic and the sunlight. Okay, garlic, I can't have pizza again. Oh, okay, that's the biggest heartbreak to me. But other than that,
really? The no sunlight is not the biggest heartbreak? Never being able to go outside again.
We sit inside all day.
Yeah, I mean, look.
Honestly, the garlic is the biggest issue for me, too.
Yeah, I just gotta wait till nighttime, and then
You have no idea how much garlic I eat.
Apparently not. Wow.
Yeah, the garlic is actually the big hit for me. I mean, going outside during the night, that would actually... The only reason I don't go outside at night is technically dangerous to go outside in the night because of crime rate in the US and because I'm kind of apparently I'm kind of night blind by how I can't see shit that well. So being a vampire will actually improve all of that for me. So yes, actually.
Okay, so apparently I'm the only one who would miss the sun.
Yes.
Yeah, I can live without it.
Okay, well,
especially after this last summer.
Oh yeah, no. Speaking as someone who is very prone to sunburn, yeah, I would not miss the sun at all.
And for those wondering, we had like record-breaking heat waves of 110, 113. I think it got as high as 115 at one point. The heat index. So.
It just stayed consistently above 100 for like 2 months.
Yeah, if we
straight
got double
minimum.
digits in the 90s, that was a cool day for us.
That was a cold wave.
It's always like that.
Front.
Okay. So I'm the only one who would miss the sunlight. I mean, even on hot days, it's the sun. It's warm for Okay, you know what?
If I want warmth, I'll put blankets on.
Than I thought it would take.
Blankets exist for warmth. I don't need the friggin' sun.
I need the sun.
Good for you.
Okay.
You're a sunflower. Are you happy now?
Not really.
There you go.
Okay, so good input. Well, there's a lot of people apparently thinking like you. In fact, there's a very large community. Almost every state, and like other countries as well, have actually a rather large vampire community of people who like to gather up and basically pretend to be vampires. Now, what is interesting about these people is they actually come in 3 classes.
Oh, yes, I know this.
So, the first class, they're cosplayers. They're harmless. They like to dress up as vampires, very gothic, very fine, very refined. The whole romantic, tragic figure thing. Again, they're harmless. They're cosplayers. you two know cosplayers. They're not usually that harmful. A little eccentric,
They're
but
playing
nothing extreme.
they're playing dress up in this case.
Pretty much. Yeah. Okay, so the second type is they're a bit more odd. So the second type is called energy vampires.
Yes.
Now, these
Them.
ones are strange. Okay, so energy vampires claim that their bodies do not produce enough of the natural bioelectromagnetic energy that all of us need to survive. And to feel good, otherwise they feel drained and have lackluster energy, they actually need to take another person's energy in order to recharge themselves. Now, if you're thinking this sounds bonkers, well, yeah, I have to agree with you. But I will say, on an interesting note, this was actually tested using a very sensitive magnometer, which is capable of measuring bioelectromagnetic fields of humans. They tested this on an energy vampire and a person she drains from. Yeah, I know. Read into that what you will. And they did notice that the before and after images of this, that her bioelectromagnetic field actually gained a little bit while his decreased. Now, to be fair, bioelectromagnetic fields change with our emotions, so it is possible that this was all just a
Placebo.
giant placebo
Yeah, I
effect.
was literally just
Yeah,
thinking that
I'm
argument.
almost
like,
positive it was just placebo
this
effect.
sounds like placebo.
But take of it what you will. Whatever you'll take of it, that's it. So, but again, like the cosplayers, they're mostly harmless unless you actually are afraid of someone stealing your energy, which, to be fair, nowadays people are. The energy vampires aren't going to hurt you. They have no, they're fine. Then we come to class 3. Okay, I'm not going to lie, class 3 creeps me out. Because class 3 are the ones who are hardcore, who actually drink blood. Now,
Yes.
the less hardcore ones drink pig's blood or blood of animals.
You call that less hardcore? I call that even more hardcore because it's one thing to drink
No, they are
human
less
blood.
hardcore.
No, I call that less.
No, because this is why they're the less hardcore. And there are actually blood bars where people who do this can go and get blood, which I accidentally stumbled onto one in New York. Very, very weird. Again, not bad, but the extreme versions of class 3 are the ones who drink human blood. Now, they don't go to a blood bank and order blood. They will literally get someone and with their consent make small cuts on this person's body and drink their blood. Which, I'm sorry, look, I know there's consent and technically it's not illegal, but I'm sorry, it's one step away from cannibalism. In my opinion. I mean, it's weird, okay? I'm sorry, it creeps me out. Thoughts?
So, with the I think we've all probably seen the cosplayer at one point or another, and we just ignore them.
Yeah.
For the energy vampires, those are the one I actually hear of and expect to see more often, just because that's like the more common for some reason, in my opinion. Mainly because they don't actually do any bodily harm in their procedures. All they do is just, I guess, technically steal your energy waves, which I guess, depending on what you like, could be harmful.
Yes. And, well, to be fair, there is vampire lore where they don't drink blood, but instead drink life force, but we'll get to that later.
Yeah. To the people who drink animal blood, this one always... The reason I saw these people as more extreme than the people who do the human blood is because raw animal blood, I would be so afraid of the pathogens that you could pick up compared to human blood, just because I'm like, well, you're probably just going to get, I don't know, HIV or something through human blood that you don't actually keep track of who you're drinking from. But from animal, I mean, can you imagine getting like rabies or something?
Well, fair enough, but also bear in mind that as far as like consuming blood and things, you do have to remember that your stomach acids actually work pretty well in this. Like, you can drink snake venom and survive because it'll dissolve in your stomach acid. It's only really a problem if you have like an ulcer or some hole in your stomach lining. So it's actually not as dangerous as you think. But I'm not I'm not saying it's still not a bit creepy, but I find it more extreme to find a person, cut them, and drink the blood that laps up. I'm sorry, it's just like that's like self mutilation and borderline cannibalism to me. So that's why to me they're the more extreme because again they're feasting on human blood and. Later on in various episodes, we're going to get to some of the dangers of cannibalism, but
I
that's why
think
to
that's
me it's a
gonna
bit
be
more
with
extreme.
I believe, Wendigo, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, the Wendigo and also a little bit of the werewolf.
Oh yeah, yeah, I remember that chapter.
Yeah, so that would be fun, but yeah, that's why I find them more extreme. But again, there's not many of them, thankfully. But I just
They are out there, and I
they
believe
are out there.
they shop from the same community of people who actually chop off um, parts of their body to sell to people to eat, and
Yeah,
if I
which
recall correctly.
fun fact: cannibalism is not actually illegal in the United States as long as there's consent.
Yeah,
That's
no. Is it illegal for a doctor to start chopping off limbs as long as there's consent?
yeah.
For those people who got the rare psychological disease where they feel that a body part don't belong on there.
It's where they want to be amputees or disabled. Yeah,
Well,
it's
there's two. There's the people who want to be amputees, and then there's the people who psychologically they think a body part does not belong on them. Like that their arm or their leg should not be a part of their body, and the fact that it is part of their body is confusing them mentally.
oh yeah, those two.
Yeah. There
The
is
mind,
a
the
slight
mind's a weird
distinction.
thing.
It is very
Yeah,
strange, and those people I'm referring to, you can easily argue they do, like, it is straight up proven they have a psychological illness, and
no, absolutely.
scientists have been trying to, and psychologists have been trying to figure out whether they should, if they should actually go through with the surgery, because there's been very mixed results, and these people, the worst case I've heard are people like putting bleach in their eyes because they wanted their eyes gouged out, and no
Yeah,
doctor would do it, and they self-blinded themselves. And some say, yes, it's the best feeling ever because now I don't have my eyes anymore. And then other people are like, yeah, that was a stupid decision. I wish I got medication.
yeah. No,
So
I agree.
it's
So
very
personally,
split.
yeah, no, it's split. Personally, I'm on the side of I don't think you should ever like encourage a delusion because honestly, reality is a cold-hearted bastard and he remains undefeated. So that's where I stand. But more studies need to be done. So do that. Thankfully, it's not like a horribly extensive issue, but
No,
still,
it's
yeah,
very
I
rare
agree.
to have that
It's very
condition.
rare, but it's odd. But that's still it. And okay, so yeah, that's the vampire culture. I think it's only nice that we touch on the real vampire culture a bit and then move off because honestly, we could do like a lot of videos on that, and I really don't want to go down that rabbit hole.
Oh yeah, that's a rabbit hole.
Let's stick to the actual monster. So back to the actual vampire. So when people think of vampires, they normally think of a romantic, tall, dark, brooding figure, this monster in the night who's very charming, but will suck out your blood and turn you into one of his undead minions. Um, Now the vampire has another unique problem in that its myth has been very, very muddied, not only by time, but also especially by Hollywood. Hollywood has muddied the vampire myth more than I think any other myth, which is why because it's so popular. It is the most popular monster in the world, probably, and even without Hollywood's influence. And so, because of that, it's very muddied. And one of the best examples of how Hollywood has muddied this myth is one of the big, like, staples of being a vampire is that you can't take sunlight. If a vampire goes to the sun, they'll dissolve. Believe it or not, that was not part of the original vampire myth. While vampires were considered to be nocturnal, they were never actually allergic to sunlight. It would never kill them.
I think at most it just weakens them.
At most a week, it's like a vampire bat. It's just not their natural time of night of hunting. But again, the reason that came about was actually completely because of, well, not Hollywood, but because of media movies. That came from the first vampire movie, Nosferatu,
I gotcha.
which was
Uh,
a German movie, if I'm not mistaken, and it was actually, funny enough, a bootleg version of Dracula because they never asked for the rights to do this movie, which is why they actually changed a lot of names to do it. The story was pretty much the same, but they changed a lot of things. And one of the biggest things they changed was the ending. So, understand, this was in the 1920s. This was a silent movie. And back then, movies weren't that long. So, like nowadays, we're willing to sit through 3 hour movies. In 1920s, like, no freaking way. Nosferatu, I think, was maybe an hour long at best.
um, I looked that up because
Hang on, hang
thank you,
on.
Zed, because I think it was less than an hour. I think it was like closer to under an hour runtime. I believe because I remember.
An hour and 21 minutes. It's an
Okay,
hour and a half long.
that's
Okay,
actually
so
really long for that time period.
for that time period, that was really long. So, if anyone's ever read Bram Stoker's Dracula, they know it's a pretty long book, and you could easily make a 2 to 3 hour movie out of it. So back then, they needed a way to kind of end the movie quickly. So someone came up with the idea, the vampire said not to like sunlight. Why don't we just, extend that to its natural hyperbole and say that sunlight kills the vampire? And that's how the movie ends with the Count basically getting vaporized by sunlight. And it's been a staple of the vampire myth ever since, even though it wasn't until the movies that that actually became a thing. Which I find interesting. What about you guys?
I always knew about the Nosferatu one. Surprisingly, before I read the book, because that one I remember that vampires never used to be weak to sunlight until the Nosferatu movie came out.
Right.
Because and I remember watching the Nosferatu death scene. It is actually hilarious to watch it. You just see him about to what I believe bite the woman, and then suddenly the sun come in, and you just see him. It's like the worst effect of he disappear and smokes replace him. And I'm like, did he teleport or did he die? I think it's one of the two. Like,
Apparently, he was supposed to have died. So, well done. And funny enough, on a side note, they actually remade this movie in like the 70s, which interesting choice. But so anyway, again, reality, they were just nocturnal. However, funny enough, there is an actual real world base for this. There is a disease where people have an allergy to sunlight,
albino, I think.
an extreme photosensitivity, photoallergic eruption, I think is what it's called. And
Yeah, I have family members who have it.
yeah, it is literally a skin reaction that's triggered by sunlight. Um, and it can cause some
Heavy blistering, I
pretty
believe.
heavy blistering, rashes, and at times so many blisters it can even seem like the skin is smoking, which is all kinds of creepy. But it's not like they're not creepy. That's not their fault. I'm just saying, like, wow, allergies are no joke.
Very rare too, because
Oh no, it is extremely rare. Which Zed, you mentioned you have family members like that. It's pretty rare, right?
My mother and my aunt have it.
I'm guessing not like
oh,
extremes, like
well,
Oh
that,
no, if they don't have protection out, it'll feel like a million needles are prickling their skin. They won't be able to deal with the sunlight.
yeah. Did they break into boils or just a bad rash,
I
or
don't
if they never
know if
actually
they
tested
never
it?
wanted to take the chance.
so.
Probably.
No, they have tested for it. They know they have it. Or well, it's a version of porphyria.
Yeah. Well, again, that's the thing about allergies. They
Um,
come in different levels. Some people
yeah,
are
they
more
come in
severe
different
than
levels.
others.
Like I know my mother and my aunt, and I think a cousin of theirs are the main ones that I know of their generation that have it. But like my grandmother, in enough heat and sunlight, will get a bad rash.
Okay.
But she doesn't fully have it. She's mainly just a carrier of it, which is why they also think I'm a carrier of it. I just don't have
Ah.
it, but it's there.
Nice.
Probably recessive is what they think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The other
Makes
thing
sense.
is that I think tracing it seems like it skips every 2 generations. So if that's the case, I'm safe. My kids are safe. My grandkids are screwed.
Ah, right.
You're gonna be like when they get born, they're like,
I'm
yeah, good
I'm gonna
luck for
have to
that.
find a way to teach my kids. Now, when this happens,
Good
here's
luck.
what you're gonna have to do. It's like you're gonna have to do this, not me, because you don't have it.
That'll be fun.
It will make no sense, and then the day will come, and they'll go, "Oh, that's what he was talking about. We just thought he was nuts."
Yeah. I can imagine the grandkids saying, couldn't you have just passed us some clock like normal grandparents? Uh, Fun. But where was I going with this? So yeah, so the sunlight thing may have like a real world implication, but it was mostly Hollywood who made it so that the sunlight kills vampires. That's completely done by the influence of movies, and it's become a staple ever since. Um, which actually it's kind of like Frankenstein, how Hollywood made Frankenstein monster basically a moron, and which goes against the book completely because in the book the Frankenstein monster was extremely intelligent. But again, that shows Hollywood's influence. But moving on, since if you've ever seen Nosferatu, Nosferatu looks very different from what you'd think of the vampire. Like he's kind of a gnome, big ears, those two pointed teeth, the
And they
creepy
they
fangs.
can
Like,
see the image that you all are seeing as well.
yeah,
Yeah.
but
Yeah,
you can
so
look it up. He's very creepy looking. Just like, what the hell? Because the modern look of a vampire is a very tall, thin, and elegant man, which is been made popularized by really two big actors who did this. Was one Bela Lugosi in 1934's Dracula. Was it 34? And
Hang on.
Christopher Lee, who played Dracula in the 1950s through various Hammer horror movies. They're really the two staples who turned Dracula into this very elegant, almost nobleman vampire, which, because Dracula is the most famous vampire, made vampires into these very noble, tragic figures.
for those
There was a Dracula movie in 1931. Maybe that's the one you're thinking of.
That's
watching
probably
the
it.
YouTube video, that's Christopher Lee, not the other guy.
Yeah, not Bela Lugosi. Bela Lugosi was in black and white. He and Christopher Lee are the two most famous Draculas, even by today's standards. And
Yep, it's
again,
the
they really put
1931.
the staple on it.
Ooh, cutting out there a little bit,
Oh,
Archimage. Uh-oh. We're losing Archimage. The vampires got him.
Sorry.
He's become a robot. The robot vampires. No one ever expects them.
Yeah. Okay, am I back?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, sorry about that. I think I just turned my head a weird way. Okay, so this is Hollywood's influence on vampire. This is the tall, thin, romantic noblemen that vampires have become. In reality, though, vampires were usually not like this at all. They were actually rather muddy, gruddy looking, oftentimes bloated and fat, which quite different from the from Christopher Lee's elegant portrayal.
So closer to the Nosferatu, kind of, just fatter.
Pretty much, yeah. Again, the vampire myth is kind of odd, and most of the powers of vampire didn't even come from Hollywood or even from local legends. They came from books. Basically, two books. One was The Vampire, and the other, of course, is Bram Stoker's Dracula. These two books really cemented the powers and the looks that vampires have today. The very bloodthirsty, hungry monsters that had magical powers to turn into bats and wolves and mists and everything else, that had these restrictions on them, that were these undead monsters, because, well, vampires are reanimated corpses. That's pretty much the big staple throughout all of them. But it was these two books that really stapled it. Bram Stoker's Dracula, of course, being the more famous. And, well, that is what got a lot of its powers. Now, because of this, these two books, though, did draw from local legends. So with that, we have to kind of take a look at some of the big staples of the vampire. For instance, they can shapeshift. They don't like to look at the cross. They can hypnotize people, and they can't cross running water. There's their aversion to mirrors, things like that.
Garlic, the holy
Garlic as well.
symbols.
Yeah, cross
Um,
holy symbols.
Dogs for some reason, because I remember the original Dracula turned into a giant dog. Um,
Yes. Dog or wolf. Usually it was a wolf.
what else? There was several other things. I don't think. Yeah, it wasn't until like the Blade movies that you got the giant bat-like monster that appeared.
Yeah,
Um,
that was definitely all Hollywood. So, looking back at the myth, when you want to actually, anytime you want to dissect a myth, one of the first things you should do is look at what the name means, because figuring out what the name means can tell you a lot about the monster. So, for vampire, oddly enough, if you trace back the vampire, basically the name, which comes from many different pieces of the word, but all of them were pretty much a representation of evil. So the word vampire literally denoted anything evil or wicked, anything horrible was called a vampire. Which the pronunciation has changed, but that's where it came from. So anything unnatural was vampire. And, well, that's how the name pretty much started. And this is a case where the myth kind of evolved around the word. And a lot of the staples of the vampire came later on, which actually doesn't seem to make sense, but kind of does make sense in the end. For instance, one of the most famous is garlic. You know, why can't the vampire take garlic? Believe it or not, the garlic actually makes the most sense of all of the traits of the vampire in its weird way, because garlic is actually a natural repellent. Um, it can actually repel mosquitoes and other bloodsuckers, and it can actually, stop various blood infections. So garlic's actually very good. So believe it or not, your two's love of garlic means that mosquitoes don't like you very much.
That is a
That's
lie.
a
They
lie.
love to
That's
eat
a
me.
bald-faced lie,
That
Alchemist.
is a
You lie.
bald-faced
Yeah,
lie.
as many times as I get bitten and eaten by
While you're
mosquitoes,
eating garlic, while you're eating garlic,
I could be sweating garlic and they still would come after me.
you're not sweating garlic. You don't eat enough garlic to be sweating garlic.
You don't know what I eat. Like you hear a crunch and it's like, well, are you eating raw garlic right now?
But garlic is a natural repellent, believe it or not. They put it in gardens and other things to repel various forms of bloodsuckers. So it was actually, I don't know how effective a repellent it was. Probably not that effective, but it was a natural repellent. So the logic is kind of sound. Garlic used to repel one form of bloodsuckers, maybe it could repel another. The cross and religious symbols, obviously, because repelling evil. The shapeshifting came later on, and I think that's more of just to make Dracula more evil. Like, it wasn't. There's not a lot of instances where vampires shapeshift in original myths. Like, very rare, if any. So where does this actually leave? What do you guys take from this as far as the vampire mythos goes? Like, based on this information.
Um, I was trying to, because I vaguely recall, I was trying to look up African vampires because I recall vaguely, I thought they did shape shifting. Um, but no, they're even weirder. They take on more of a witch quality to themselves. Oh wait, no,
Yeah.
they do shapeshift because they can fly. So yes. Got the weirdest name. You will. I'll post that in Discord. And I'll spell it Obayifo. Good luck trying to pronounce that. I'm not even gonna try to pronounce that.
No, I don't think I will either.
Obayifo. Obayifo. Again, kind of
Oh, but if you
yeah, yeah. Go figure. Go.
that sounds a it sounds like it's a shanty.
It was
Oh,
often
really? Okay,
it was
awesome. All
often a
right.
shows. It was like the description is vampire and witch like mythological creature.
Yeah, African deities like to like kind of combine things, which
So yeah, exactly. So that probably came
yeah,
later
and
on as well during the time when vampires started to shapeshift.
yeah, and well, believe it or not, with Africa, like most of their stuff shapeshifts in some way or another.
That's why I was trying to look up vampires in Africa because I'm like most of African mythology shapeshifts.
Has
So I
shapeshifters.
bet you if it I was trying to see when vampire popped up in African lore because I bet you when that did is when vampires started to shapeshift.
It's not impossible, though. It is unlikely that Bram Stoker's like knowledge of vampires came from African vampires. Like, it's not impossible. I doubt it.
No, but I was betting like I was banking on the fact that there was probably a mythos of a mythological creature that, drain blood or have more of the ancient vampire tendencies of more nocturnal bays, more of just a goblin that would just, how people regarded it as just a catch-all for all types of monsters because I recall like there's various African mythos where there's just the equivalent of a boogeyman type mythos creature.
Right.
And it's like different for each tribe. So I'm like that's why we're trying to see when the vampire popped up in African folklore.
No, that could make sense, but again, um, but yeah. So also note with the shape shifting is that a lot of things like a wolf, a bat, often nocturnal creatures, often seen as kind of like spooky and everything else. Miss, for instance. So again, more than likely added for the aesthetic appeal to emphasize how evil Dracula is, which most of it comes from that. Again, also tying back to the word vampire, basically meaning anything evil, foreboding, or scary, which makes a lot of sense. So now now looking at the actual time frame is that we have to remember that the vampire mythos is old. It is an old myth. And again, that denotes from it basically mean anything evil. But looking at the original vampires that I said, that a lot of them were, fat, gaudy, and they had a ruddy and dark countenance, and they were overly bloated from gorging on human blood. That's not Edward Cullen. I'm so ashamed I know that name. That is his name, right? If by chance I get it wrong.
No,
Um
that's his name.
yeah,
Yeah.
the
That
Twilight
just
guy.
makes it more shameful. So yeah, ruddy
Does it make you
fat
more
guy's
shameful
not.
to know that now he's Batman?
Ironically,
I mean,
from
it
one
seems like
bat
a bit of
actor,
a natural
Because to
progression.
me it doesn't.
I
it
mean,
makes
honestly, it's
sense
a natural progression,
from one mythological bat figure to another.
pretty much.
At least this one he
I
didn't
say
make
from one
sparkle.
mythological bat creature to a better one.
At least he didn't
Yeah,
make this one sparkle.
yeah, that's
Although that new Batman movie, if he had started to sparkle, I would honestly start. You know what? He did kind of sparkle in the opening scene when they were shooting at him and the bullets were bouncing off of his body armor.
I wouldn't call that sparkling. I call that flashing.
One main splash is another main sparkle.
Okay, moving on because this is not a debate I want to get into. Um, where was I going with this? Okay, so the actual earliest description of vampires with this ruddy, dark complexion and this overswelling of human blood, sounds just as fanciful, but like it's on the other side of the visual spectrum. But it actually has a bit more logic to it. And that is that it actually describes very well what happens to a body when it's decomposing. When when a body's decomposing, gases naturally start to build up as the body breaks down, which expands the body, giving it a very bloated appearance. It can also appear that fingernails and hair have grown because the skin's being drawn back. I don't care what urban legends say, your skin fingernails and hair do not continue to grow after you're dead. It does not happen. It is a lie. Stop believing them. And also, this expansion can cause small blood vessels to burst. And if some of the blood hasn't dried out yet, which is often true, it can leak out the corners of the mouth, the nose, and other orifices from the body. So all natural, visions of decomposure know today, but back in the time frame, back then when they used to bury bodies, it might not have been as well known, especially when they're more superstitious and would have burned their bodies or anything else. They wouldn't have widely known what a body does when it decomposes. In fact, I argue today not many people actually know what happens when a body naturally decomposes. I mean, wouldn't you say that's true?
Yeah.
I mean, Alchemist, you're telling me that when a body, that my fingernails and hairs don't keep growing when I die?
No, they do not.
Well, clearly,
Okay,
that's the fake news. The media
I will
is
actually argue this with you. They do not.
clearly the media had got to you already. I'm sorry, but people make those arguments.
Oh, I know they make the arguments, but unfortunately, science and biology is on my side.
When have they ever? Yeah, when have they ever listened to freaking logic?
Okay, so yeah, the natural decay of a corpse could have actually shown that, which actually tributes to real life vampire hunters, because there were vampire hunters back in the day. In fact, there are still vampire hunters now in some smaller countries, but we'll touch on that a bit more later.
Oh, okay.
Oh yeah, no, we'll go into that.
Now I actually do have reason to get this one image.
Yeah. So, anyway, vampire hunters. Now, what they did was, if there was ever a notion of vampires, like a lot of people dying mysteriously, or someone says they thought they saw one of their dead relatives, or even something bad happening, because again, vampire just basically meant something evil. Someone would come in and say, "You probably have a vampire. I can go cure it." So they go look for whoever was accused who was recently dead. They'd open up, and what do they find? They find a decomposing body, which means that they were overbloated, probably had blood dripping from their mouth. Which everybody said, "Look, see, he scourged himself on human blood." And again, that's where a lot of the vampire stuff came from. And then, of course, the hunters would chop off their heads and drive a stake through their arms, which is actually this is not fanciful. They actually do this. There is proof of this. They have found graves with the heads chopped off and stakes driven through their heart, which is actually still being done today, believe it or not. In certain parts of Europe, smaller villages, they are still doing this because there is still a fear of the vampire. There are still vampire hunters out there, which is interesting, because as much as the vampires capture our imagination, vampire hunting has also captured a lot of people's imagination. There was so much on vampire hunting, they sold kits to this. And yeah, Blade is a good example.
I couldn't get that in fast enough. I was trying to sneak that in on you guys, but okay. Currently they're seeing the Bulgarian. I believe you said that was a Bulgarian. For those who are actually watching on YouTube, the picture you currently are seeing is a Bulgarian skeleton corpse with a stake or some type of object driven through the heart of the corpse.
It could also be an iron spike.
Yes. It's hard to make out because, I mean, it is a skeleton and...
Yes, but they have found ones with iron spikes in it as well. Bulgaria and other places, but yeah, it even sold vampire kits, which you can still buy today.
Yes.
Most of them
as I found as I was looking for some of these images.
Most of them, I have to say, though, are fake and presented when many places were going through a vampire craze, like repurposed toolkits. So it's doubtful they were ever actually used to hunt vampires. But still, it just goes to show how even before Hollywood got its grips in it, people really were just drawn to this vampire thing. So much so that it's even in modern day. like Zed, I believe you have some representations of Pokemon that have
Yeah.
vampiristic
Is it
qualities,
that?
right?
Okay,
Is it that
so
time now? Wait a
Yes,
I
minute.
it's
picked
time.
this one specifically for
Okay,
one entry.
hang on. Let me get everything ready for this for the people who are on YouTube.
Oh boy, this is
Yeah,
gonna be
we
fun.
gotta get it all ready, all nice looking for them. Who's that? Monsters Pokemon, our new favorite talk out.
Oh
And no
god,
one would ever see this one coming.
go for it.
Well, the Pokemon that I have chosen is something completely the opposite from this. It is Beautifly.
Oh my goodness.
But the reason I have chosen this is because of one specific Pokedex entry I found. Allow me to read it.
Go for
It
it.
has an aggressive nature. It stabs prey with its long, narrow mouth to drain the prey's fluids.
Oh,
Okay.
okay, that makes sense. That I'm not gonna lie, that's kind of what I thought, but yeah,
Yeah.
for those who aren't watching YouTube, it's a butterfly-looking thing.
Yes.
Basically, imagine.
Kinda cute.
Yeah, yeah. It's like
But apparently,
butterfly.
it just uses its mouth to stab. Now, all of its other entries mention about it taking nectar and pollen and like normal from flowers. But the fact this just says prey leads me to believe it could be anything.
I think you're looking at the Y Pokédex entry, if I'm not
Although
mistaken.
that is yes,
No.
that is the Y entry. Now, the fact it says prey and the fact that I know there are Pokemon that have flowers on them.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I mean, you can look at Venusaur. It has a giant flower on its back.
Yeah,
I'm just
this thing must be a
imagining Count
nightmare.
Dracula throw out his signature Pokemon and a Beautifly come
It's a
out
Beautifly.
and go get them, blah, go get them my best. Zubat, Crobat, something where
No.
bat is Beautifly. What the? I like the
Actually,
colors. They're very
I'm
beautiful.
I'm surprised they haven't done that in Pokemon. Wait, have they done that in Pokemon? I haven't watched
No,
a
not that I
vampire
know.
episode.
There might have been a vampire. Hang on, I can check.
Damn, if this hasn't happened, Pokemon, get on this. Here's your way. Here's your
like
new episode.
a vampire themed episode, maybe.
I mean, I know they've had Halloween themed episodes.
Yeah, I actually
mean-
don't know. I stopped watching around the Shino time, which was like third or fourth season or something like that. So
Makes sense.
now I'm actually curious what Beautifly.
Looking at things, no, I don't think there has been, but I also may just not be finding it.
I'm not willing to watch every episode
well,
of Pokemon to find
I'm not willing. I'm not willing to do that either. But I don't know. Maybe there has been. Maybe there hasn't. I'm not sure.
Makes sense.
But yes, this butterfly is the closest thing to a vampire that I could find.
Okay. Well, again, kudos on your ability to find Pokemon.
Which
that
again,
relate to
it's
monsters.
very surprising how there is no entry on like Crobat or something saying it, because all of Crobat's entries is just how it's very fast and quiet.
Really? Huh.
That's pretty much it.
That's the purple bat, right?
That's the
Yep.
so that's the purple bat with 4 wings, the final evolution of Zubat.
Literally,
Okay.
most of the entries I saw, it just says its 2 legs became 2 wings, and now it moves very fast and very quiet, essentially. There you go. I've just summed up like half of the Pokedex entries at minimum.
What about that
Nice.
Swulon, I believe, the
Which one?
bat that have the heart stamp nose, I believe.
Oh, freaking Swoobat?
Swoobat, yeah. What about
I don't think that has anything.
because
That's a
what
Zubat knockoff. That's how bad that thing is.
that's what I thought was gonna end up with it. But then I'm like, yeah, but all the Dex entries keep talking about its nose, not that it looked like a bat.
Yeah, like that thing is just that was designed to be a knockoff of Zubat, so they didn't have to use it for
Really,
one
they
game.
don't have a lot of bat Pokemon now that I think of it.
No, they don't.
What about the legendary bat Pokemon? The one from Sun and Moon, the Moon.
Lunala?
Lunala.
Lunala is. I don't think Lunala is going to be anything close to a vampire. I can check, but I don't believe.
I know it's a bat. That's the only thing I know.
Well, again, just goes to show you, most people find bats creepy, I guess. But
Lunala?
again, the point is kind of showing how
No.
vampires
all
and
about the
media
moon.
just mix.
Yeah, of course it's all about the moon because it's the moon Pokemon. It's all just going to be moon.
Yeah, I got nothing.
Yep. Moon.
It looked like a bat. That's why I'm
Yeah,
throwing it out there.
it looks like a bat, but nah.
Dang.
Again, somehow a butterfly is closer.
Okay.
Again, Pokemon. So that is our Pokemon entrance for this podcast.
Yep.
Always fun.
Because
Uh,
when I think Dracula and his Pokemon team, I think
a butterfly.
I think a butterfly.
Okay, so back on topic. Where was I going with this? Oh yeah, so before that pause is that a lot of things. So the reason I went into this is that we've seen how vampires basically just have infected our media and how media has mudded the vampire mythos, but the vampire mythos didn't only affect the media and the media vice versa. Basically, again, vampires were blamed for a lot of things, which may go back to them basically meaning anything evil. Even even like a sudden spree of tuberculosis or consumption, as it used to be called, could be blamed on that. Where people would have, their whole families die from this disease, it would actually be blamed on a vampire in several cases. And they would dig up the relative that they thought was doing it, behead him, and stake him through the heart. Even in the United States, it happened. So it just goes to show you how deeply embedded this creature has really been in basically like all of human history. And many sources of it have come through it. Even people who were hanged could have been considered to come back as vampires. Now, hanging may have more of an interesting aspect to the vampire mythos because, believe it or not, there is an art to hanging. There is a science to hanging, and it can be done wrong. You have to hang people just right. If you don't get it right, to get it the hanging right, you have to snap their neck. Best way to do it. Well, not for the person being hanged, obviously, but
Well, yes. Otherwise, the death otherwise is very gruesome.
yeah. But here's the thing, though. Besides a gruesome death, hanging can go wrong in that they might not actually die. Sometimes hanging, in fact, quite more often than they'd like to admit, hanging sometimes would just simply crush the windpipe. A crushed windpipe is painful. It can knock you out, even stop your breathing, but you won't actually die from it in all cases. But you'll appear to be dead. So a lot of people were actually hanged inappropriately, had their windpipes crushed, and then a couple hours later, they woke up. Which you can imagine how surprised they must have been to be hanged and then to wake up in a shallow grave, which a lot of them were. That couldn't have been fun. How would you two have felt in that situation?
I gotta pull a Kill Bill and start punching my way out of the coffin.
Well, Zed, you agree?
Yeah, that's about right.
Well, actually, a lot of them did. And
Kill Bill. I'm just imagining a lot of people coming out of the graveyard in a yellow jumpsuit back in
Yeah.
the ancient days.
well, it wouldn't have been a yellow jumpsuit; it'd be rag and tad tears. But yeah, no, they actually did that. They'd come back, and then obviously confused and disoriented, they'd go home, and it must have surprised the hell out of people to witness somebody they watched hanged suddenly walk back into town.
And for those
Which he would
wondering, that's why graves
immediately-
used to have bells on them.
Yes, which would immediately be accused of being a vampire, because quite often people would be buried without them actually being dead. And it was such a problem, there is actually a patent for a grave that has a small bell in the coffin so that the person inside can ring it in case they're still alive.
Yep.
Which, if there's a patent for it, it makes you wonder just how many times this actually happened. But
Too many times because
yeah, too many if it needed a patent.
if you recall, graveyard keepers' responsibility, beside keeping people out of the graveyard at like night or inappropriate time from vandalism, was also to go around to make sure that if someone was buried alive, they could dig them up and save them.
Yeah.
So the bell was a way, I believe, like there's two designs for it. I've seen one where there's a long string going down into the coffin, where bell up top, and they would pull the string, and that would ring the bell. And then I seen another one, I think, where they actually have the bell in the coffin with them.
I don't think that one was as popular because if it's
Yeah,
buried deep
yeah,
enough,
it's
you're not
gonna
going
be
to hear that.
muffled.
You're not going to hear
That'd
that
be-
bell. So
I seen the one with the string the most.
yeah, I think that one was probably the most like practical as far as bells
Bury
around
them with
corpses
just
go.
bury them with like a little ringing, a little dinner serving bell. Ding 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 ding. Like, did you hear something? Nope. Keep playing cards.
Right. But yeah, so hanged criminals, inappropriate deaths could also have contributed to basically this whole thought of someone dead coming back, which again is what a vampire is. It is a reanimated corpse. And yes, I know a lot of you are thinking zombie, but there's a whole nother mythos to that, which we will get to in another episode. But that's how it goes. And two of the final entries that we really need to look at as the whole vampire mythos are two of the most famous, vampire-esque humans. One being the most famous, Vlad Tepes, or Vlad the Impaler, the Prince Count Dracula himself. Yes, he was a real man. He was a prince who fought the Muslims from the Ottoman Empire from coming into his Christian country. And he was known for being exceptionally brutal. In fact, brutal doesn't begin to describe this man.
I,
He was known for impaling people, which, Shadow Arfox, I know you love
Black
this story, so take it away.
blasphemy. That's all. Alchemist, how dare you besmirch the honorable name of Vlad?
I'm not. I'm telling how brutal he was and how effective it is.
Now-
Are you kidding? He would cheer me for saying that.
Now there is some argument to. There's a lot of back and forth with this, depending on where you are and who you ask. In his own country, even there's a lot of back and forth because yes, he was very brutal. He killed. He has both a good and a bad reputation in his own country, where I believe the lower class liked him just because of the fact he was fighting against the Turks, protecting them from Ottoman rule and occupation. But at the same time,
Yes.
the noble class hated him because they actually wanted his brother to be ruler of the country, and and they try a rebellion, and yeah, his brother didn't come out of it all right afterward. But
No.
but like and that's mainly because he would actively kill a lot of the nobles to keep them weakened so he could maintain his grip on power to do
Which,
what he
considering
had to.
considering how the nobles treated him and his father, you can't really blame them.
Yeah, the nobles, I mean, if you seen Game of Thrones, then you got a good idea of what nobility is like, and the
Yeah.
whole just intrigue. I mean, I told you, I straight up said they tried to put his younger brother on the throne when he was still alive. That's, that right there should state values about, what the nobles were like. He did kill a lot of people. There's debate on how much of his killings was actually real, because the Turks, well, one, you have the Turks saying one thing, but at the same, the Ottoman Empire. At the same time, you have the Christians, because he did kill a lot of Christians from who came over from the West into his country. I can't remember why they came over, whether it was for missionary purposes or whether it was for political purposes. I think it was a mixture of both.
Probably mostly political.
When they came over, Vlad was very, well, not very hospitable to them, assuming they didn't get killed by him outright for insulting him. So
Yeah.
when they did return, and after witnessing a lot of the stuff he did do to the Ottoman prisoners and stuff, they did, for Bellis, his whole story about drinking blood and draining the blood from all his enemies and drinking them in a cup. And but then again, like, there is some testament that maybe he did make a field of impaled victims.
The field of impaled victims was probably true, just because that is the kind of thing that would actually make the Ottoman Empire turn around. Because no matter how you think about that, even by today's standards, seeing an entire forest of impaled people screaming that you can't help would be terrifying. I'm sorry. I don't care how much of a badass you think you are. You would puke seeing that.
I would turn to my soldier and go, "Sissies, let's go." Let's go, sissies.
Yeah, clearly. But yeah, but again, Vlad the Impaler. So yes, but he is the character who Bram Stoker kind of based Dracula on because he was called Dracula, which means son of the dragon or son of the devil. Now, in all fairness to those who actually read Bram Stoker's book, so Bram Stoker's novel never actually states that Dracula is Vlad Tepes. They hint at it, but they never come out right and say it. It's movies later that come out and say it. But it was definitely based off him. One of the reasons you can see is that if you read Bram Stoker's novel, for instance, you'll see that Dracula has a mustache, which Vlad Tepes was known for his mustache. In the movies, they always made Dracula clean shaven to give him more of a nobility look. But in the book, he had a very prominent mustache, so much so that it was mentioned from the first time they saw him. So yeah, that is one of the big people who, inspired this bloodthirsty monster. Another is Madame Bathory. Oh, this woman. So many names to be called from this. The Blood Countess, but this woman believed that by bathing in the blood of virgins, she would stop aging.
Now, if I'm not mistaken,
Yeah.
she used to also torture them before she actually bled them.
Yes.
Because
Yes,
she was
she
a
was.
sadist.
Oh, yeah, without a doubt. She hated the fact that she was getting older, which meant she hated young virgin girls. How dare they be prettier than her? So, yeah, fairer sex my ass. But this woman killed a lot of women.
She was a mass murderer of her
Oh,
time.
yeah. I think she wasn't caught until she actually started killing noble women too. I think she actually exhausted most of the peasants in her village.
I think they knew that she was killing the peasants. They just didn't care, if memory serves
Probably not.
correctly.
It wasn't until she started killing noble women they started to care. Which, let's be honest, it's not that much different from today.
Kind of, yeah.
Yeah.
Now I'm actually, because I remember you couldn't actually I remember you with Vlad you can argue a lot of the sadism stuff outside the impaling was
war.
Yeah, you could argue that. Well, you could argue that a lot of it may have been propaganda that got started well after his death because of the Western media, ironically enough, the media spreading it, and not the modern day media, but the ancient media of the time, just spreading the rumors of a guy who would impale so many
Turks and human beings in general.
Yeah, and that's what led to it. But I believe with her specifically, they found a dungeon with a few of the still living servant, well, not servant, but peasants that she had been torturing, if I recall correctly, when they did arrest her.
Yeah, I believe so. So, yeah, it's a difficult thing. So, really, Madame Bathory might actually be worse than Count Dracula because, in the very least, you could say he was doing it to protect his country, where she was doing it for. Yeah, it was a couple hundred, right?
650.
Yeah.
Was what they cited in her trial. Now, that was claimed by a servant girl.
Hard to say, but it was definitely a fair number that was done for nothing else than vanity.
God dang.
Yeah.
Oh, that's how she was caught. She was, they believe that she was caught in the act of torturing.
Yep, again, makes sense.
She was having dinner while the person was tortured.
Yeah. Lovely people. So, again, these are two individuals who are really, I mean, even nowadays, they're still being demonstrated in modern media, like the Castlevania series. has shown both Dracula and Madame
Now
Bathory as
with the
big
recent
bad
season,
vampires.
yes, now we got the
Yes.
Hungarian Countess.
Yeah. So again, very much in this. So what do you really take from all of this information about vampires? Like what are you guys' thoughts on this?
Well, one thing I openly have to bring this up is the fact that Castlevania 2 deal with the Hungarian Countess, Miss Elizabeth. I just gotta bring up the it that Castlevania season 2 is set during the French Revolution, namely a year before the Reign of Terror, which is 1792, and the Elizabeth died well over back in 1614. That's like over 100 years. So I can't wait. You know, clearly they're just saying, yes, he's a vampire. So he lived forever. They just pulled it because he was, if I recall correctly, her execution was she was in prison and locked up in a tower, and they literally took stone and mortar and just sealed her away in the tower. And eventually just stopped feeding her, if I recall correctly, how she was
I
executed.
believe that's correct. Yeah, I
Um,
believe that's correct.
Because I think they kept feeding. No, they did keep feeding her until she ultimately died. I don't know. I can't remember if she starved to death. I think looking over the accounts, she was in prison. What 1611, died 1614. So she spent 3 years locked in a tower in her castle. So I bet you they're gonna just say that they freed her from the tower for some.
Yeah, it makes sense. Which, ugh.
But no, that's what got me is the fact that, that they're using a dead countess as the new enemy.
I mean, yeah, at least Dracula made a little bit more sense.
Well, it's Dracula. No one's gonna question how long that guy lives.
Yeah, no one. But Madame Bathory, it's like, I don't know. I think she's like becoming a little bit more popular lately.
Yeah,
Like,
you got
there
that.
weren't a lot of Madame Bathory things. Like, she was pretty rare. Like, I think Hammer Productions had maybe one movie about her where they didn't even name her. It was just a woman
Bride of
who, like,
Dracula or
also,
something like that.
no, it was Countess Dracula or something like
Okay.
that. It wasn't one of their better films. Um, but where she basically just bathed in blood, which was really just an excuse to see an attractive woman naked in a little bit of red paint.
I mean,
Yeah, so, but again, no, good point. Zed, what about you? What do you take from all of this information so far? You know, besides the headache.
Besides the headache,
actually, to one more thing, this is gonna be relevant to Zed a
I'm
little
gonna
bit.
drink my blood now.
Ah, nice.
I got one more. Zed, I think I know the new region they need to do for Pokemon.
Oh God.
Transylvania.
What? Transylvania.
That way they can bring in more bat Pokemon. That can be some of the starters.
Are the Pseudo-Woodos gonna have corpses impaled on them?
No, they actually already have a dead tree spirit Pokemon out there.
Oh, for heaven's
They
sake!
do. They do. And
Seriously.
specifically,
Yeah.
yes, it is specifically mentioned that it's of a child that got lost in the woods and died.
And then I think it got different evolution when it becomes a oh, what was it called? Stomped? Oh,
It's Phantom and Trevenant.
okay, Phantom. Yeah, I'll post a picture for you in Disco Argument just so you can see
Yeah, no,
that.
Sounds good.
But yeah, no, they already got that. So that
Wow.
would make a good grass starter type, except it only got one evolution.
Zed, anything else on the myths? Anything on the myths, Zed?
No, I was just. I didn't know the
Okay.
story of this lady either, by the way. So now I know something more.
Oh, there you go. Okay, well, with all that being said, so to what I kind of believe probable form of events happened is vampire mythos as we began probably started off with criminals being convicted of crime, probably murder, and they're sentenced to death by hanging. And then they were most likely inappropriately hanged by their accusing people, which resulted in crushed windpipes instead of actually severed necks. In which case they were buried, probably in a very shallow grave, because who's going to bother for a criminal? And science, as poor as it was, they didn't know that a person could come back from a crushed windpipe. They would come up, wakened up, probably drowsy, not really knowing what's going on, and they'd head up to where they were being seen, and people would be like, oh my god, the dead will walk. After that, they started saying that people can come back from the dead. And eventually, they started attributing other things to this, because remember, vampire at the time was just a denotion of evil. So eventually, the superstitions kept coming around, and they started adding more and more. And more than likely, all of that eventually turned into one myth as people started putting them into one monster, combining them and giving the evil that they've been mentioning a form in this reanimated corpse, which later became the vampire. And eventually it was written down into stories like The Vampire and by Dracula, with Dracula inspiring writers like Bram Stoker to kind of take all these mythos and give it a real person, which turned into the modern day vampire we have today. Which in the end just means that the word evil was given its own form so that it can be seen to this day. That, I think, is the most probable explanation, is just a series of events that led to this original creation of the mythos. What do you guys think?
I mean,
Yeah.
pretty much. That's how most mythos get started. Is just a random. I can't help but every time you say that it was a catch-all for all monsters, think of fairies.
Yeah.
Because fairies was like a catch-all for any type of mythological creature that may have been mischievous or um not completely like evil to the point you got where it's killing you, but it could lead you astray if you dig too deep into it type deal.
Yes.
So yeah, them just using vampire as a catch-all for all those things.
And then later, specifically, it kind of being attached to reanimate corpses, because not all, while vampires are pretty much in every culture, they're not always the same. For instance, in Chinese culture, they have hopping vampires. Or is it Japanese? I
No,
think
it's
it's Chinese.
Chinese. It's
Yeah,
Chinese. You're
Chinese.
talking of the
They have
Zing.
the hopping vampires
Oh,
that hop.
yeah. Hang on. I remember those because I actually Jing Shi.
Yes. Now these actually have an explanation. It turns out
Is
that
actually pretty
corpses used
cool.
to be, yeah, corpses would be strung up by their shoulders and necks on pipes and put in between two living humans, and they'd walk them around. As they did, the corpses would bounce up and down.
So the reason they did that, there's a big reason why they did that. To touch a dead body was seen as very kind of like unclean and not something you wasn't supposed to do. It wasn't proper behavior back then in China to just randomly start touching corpses. So
Funny enough, something the Israelites also believed.
Exactly, but there's Israelite is more of a religious unclean, where I think this is just a straight up like social taboo, if I
Taboo.
remember correctly. And the corpse handlers it was also, most people did not want to see dead bodies during the day, so the corpse handlers would do most of their major movement of corpses during the night, in the dead of night. I think it was the hour of like the rat or something, how they defined it. Which would have been like 11 to 12 to 1, the witching hours essentially. So two,
So if
3.
ever seen, they would have been seen in low lighting, creepy
Oh,
moonlight.
pitch black
Yeah,
lighting. Yeah, pitch black
yeah,
lighting.
exactly.
And basically they didn't want, because they had to move a bunch of bodies over rough terrain, and they didn't want to use carts half the time because there may not been roads for them to use, they would tie their arms to those poles. There would be about 2 people handling all of these bodies. So you would have one person at the front and the end, and the corpses in the middle, and they would just be walking them, and you would just see these corpses bobbing up and down as they're walking, looking like they're hopping around. I think with the whole talisman on the front of their face, that came from just some type of things I think they were doing to purify the corpse. That one I gotta look up. I didn't really look up that one that well. But yeah, I believe, and funny enough, they are close to energy vampires, because if I recall correctly, they would suck the life force out of you, not the blood, but the life force, if I remember correctly.
Yes.
So they
Which
are
I-
actually closer to the energy vampires that we know of today.
Yes, because it's not a new thing in energy vampires. There are legends where vampires instead suck life force instead of blood. So that is an ancient thing. So it depends on the myth, but mostly it's just reanimated corpse. So it looks like mostly the fact that people didn't really understand how corpses decayed, that blood running from the mouth was just a natural progression of decaying bodies, and that failure to understand it, along with superstitions, led to this whole thing of the dead rising into this suave person. Well, the suave part, of course, came from Hollywood. But that's where mostly this mythos seemed to come. So, if anything, it's interesting to see how a dark, ruddy, overbloated figure became a tall, thin, romantic figure. I mean, if anything, it shows how our culture treats monsters. Or maybe just our fascination with the tragic, macabre figure. Or who knows? Maybe it just tells how like 2 people can change an entire monster's mythos with unforgettable performances. Or as I say it, it just shows how much influence Hollywood really has on the public mythos, on the public influence and perception of things. That's what I take from it. What about you two?
Well, what's funny is the you didn't touch on the Japanese vampires.
Oh God.
So funny enough, I'm gonna see if I can't squeeze this one in at the last minute. But heaven help me, I'm not gonna pronounce the name. Rokuro Kurubi?
Yeah, I'm
R O
not helping you
K
with that.
U R O K U B I.
I'm not helping you with
Yeah,
that.
Roku. Very
Spell
hard.
it in the type it in the Discord chat, because
Yeah, I'm butchering that.
Rokuro
There you go. That name.
yeah, Rokurokubi.
See, this is why I only stick to English. I gotta butcher one dialect in my lifetime. So this one, Zay, you probably seen it. It is and once I actually long neck yokai.
I believe I have seen
The
something like
long
that.
neck
Yeah.
woman yokai. So the way this one work is if a woman has been unfaithful to their spouse, I believe it was a woman who had been unfaithful to their spouse would eventually when they die they would become this yokai, and they would basically just go around drinking the blood from anybody they could get a hold to, any man who were being unfaithful to their wife, I believe. Little bit, I haven't studied this one deep, but I remember that was the closest to a vampire of someone who drink blood. Because they don't directly have any just direct vampires. Go figure.
Yeah. To be fair, the name actually means long neck. Well, as you can see, it was said that they were normal during the
Rokurokubi.
day,
Okay, got it.
but at night,
Rokurokubi.
their heads could actually detach from their bodies and go out scaring drunk men and various other things. To be fair, these lot were considered more pranksters than anything else. Like, they didn't turn men into vampires, and
No, the only thing that's even got them close is the fact they drink blood.
yeah, and like it wasn't always human blood. A lot of times it was small animals. I believe it came about mostly in the Edo period, so roughly the 1600s is when they traced it back, if
Yes.
my memory serves me.
Yeah, so not that much. I found it interesting that the Chinese have a closer, closer tie to what we would in the West would consider vampire, whereas the Japanese, let's face it, we get so much from Japanese culture nowadays. Yet vampires, not so much. They have to take that from us.
Yeah, pretty much. But it's interesting what Japanese, again, shared cultures. It's interesting. But it's interesting also like how the kind of same mythos appears in various cultures, because like most cultures have a vampire equivalent, though Japan, this is the closest they have, despite the literally dozens and dozens of demons that Japan has in its mythology, which we will touch on in a later episode.
Yeah, one of these days I gotta get that book of all the yokais and have that
Oh
ready when
God,
we
we'll
do.
be here forever.
Well, I at least gotta have that ready for when we actually do touch on that subject.
Oh yeah, but we will be here forever.
Oh yeah, we will.
With that, I think that really covers the big vampire things. Anything you guys want to add?
We gotta come. Zed, you and I gotta work on a Dracula team because clearly he's
Oh,
lacking
God.
with Beautify. If Beautifly is his main, he's screwed. I mean, that Pokemon's weak against rocks and it's weak against fire, which makes sense. The sun is weak against Let's see, what else is it?
It's weak against flying, which is sad because it is flying.
Yeah, so
I regret so much of this. Okay, so nothing relevant to the monsters then.
No, why would we have anything of that?
well,
I have no idea.
we came to the conclusion that vampires don't sparkle once and for all.
Yes, that is important. I'm glad we came to that conclusion.
So that's the main conclusion, that even in the original mythos, vampires never sparkle. So
there you go.
Yes, they didn't die in the sun, but they never sparkle either. So
there you go. And well, with that, since apparently we actually have listeners, if you guys ever want to leave a comment of a monster you'd like us to review, put them down. We might actually do them in a later episode. And if you'd like any further information on this, by all means, check out the book Probable, Possible, Plausible, an Explanatory Guide to Monsters and Myth for more information. And with that, that was vampires.
Okay. Oh, and I'm going to have that book listed. If you're wondering where the cover that we're using for this is from the cover of the book, so I'm gonna have that always listed in the description of this. So easy enough for people to find. But yeah, that's it. Any last
I'm
word
here too,
before
by the way.
There we go. There we go. Any last word before I kill this recording for us? I like it.
Okay, I think we're good.
Silent as the
Well,
grave.
we're done.
That's the perfect way to end this.
Awesome.
Bye.